If one looks at what our respondents have said in our annual National Reconciliation Barometer survey, is that they regard national reconciliation as a worthy objective to pursue. Almost about 70% of our respondents have indicated that they still believe that it is something that we need to pursue. About 60% said that we have made some progress. But as you also rightly mentioned in your introduction, the majority of South Africans say that we will get stuck if we do not address the question of inequality in our society.
Now, why are the majority of South Africans not trusting one another? What is the reason behind all of this?
I mean, the reasons are multifaceted. I think underlying all of this is the fact that our social infrastructure is still largely geared to a dispensation of the past. If one looks at our geography in South Africa, our settlement patterns, that people still live largely in homogeneous spaces. If one looks at the way the transport networks function, they're still largely geared to service neighborhoods that are largely separate. Where we do see interaction taking place is within the workplace and within spaces of trade and commerce and so forth. But when we go home in the evenings, those of us who are fortunate enough to have employment, we socialize and we reflect on our daily experiences within very homogeneous environments. And therefore, I think what one sees is very low levels of interactions, but particularly social interaction amongst ordinary South Africans.
Talk to us about the sample size and how reliable are these findings?
Yes, I mean, it's a national sample of about 2,220 South Africans. It's a representative sample in terms of race, in terms of gender, in terms of age categories, and also the rural and urban divide. So it's one in which we have a large amount of confidence that it does reflect the responses that we set out to measure. It is also an instrument that we've been using since 2003, that we've honed over the years, and is pretty much confident that we measure what we set out to ask people in the survey itself.
Now, racism is still an issue. What other areas did you look at that have an impact on race relations in South Africa?
You know, I think a society is a very sort of multifaceted thing. And one of the things that really impact on racism is the question of economic inequality, the distribution of resources within society, and also the extent to which that impacts on people's mobility to transcend different spaces within our society in order to be able to engage with each other, to have contact with each other. Now, I think one must be clear that contact would not necessarily, or increased levels of contacts would not necessarily improve reconciliation. It also has to do with the quality of interaction that we have as a society. But I think the bottom line, the most necessary requirement for these things to take place is that we are able to converge in certain spaces and be able to talk to each other, engage with each other, and also socialize and experience each other's lives with each other.
Now, is that enough, though? Because former President Thabo Mbeki said that we do live in an unequal society. But how do South Africans then overcome these economic inequalities when, after 1994, we have created a more unequal society, it seems like?
I think that to us, it really is the million-dollar question. For the past decade or more, we have really grappled with the question of how do we create a more inclusive economy in South Africa? And I think at the front of this is the question, how do we increase levels of employment? Because the biggest problem that we have right now in terms of our economy is unemployment. And we also see that one of the primary drivers as far as inequality in South Africa is concerned is salary income. In other words, those who earn and those who do not earn.
Now, today is Reconciliation Day. How do we finally start to get this process going if we have failed since 1994? It is a new day in this particular year.
You know, I think if one has to trust in the economy alone, I think the prognosis is probably not as good as it should be. We know what has happened the past week in the markets. Today, the Federal Reserve in America would also, it's very likely to increase its interest rates, which will also again have an impact on our economy. So, you know, I think one also has to focus on the interpersonal. One has to ask yourself, you know, do you show the necessary understanding for your fellow citizens? Do we have the necessary empathy, and try to understand also where they come from in terms of the views that they have with regard to society? It is very difficult just to make an intervention, I think, for any entity, whether it's government, business, etc. But I think one of the areas where we can at least start to address this question is within our education system.
Mr. Hofmeyr, thank you so much for your time.
You're most welcome.
That was Jan Hofmeyr, policy analysis of the Institute of Justice and Reconciliation, chatting to us about reconciliation in South Africa.